grew up in a really safe city in the Midwest, in an even safer neighborhood sort of set back in the woods, and separated from the main part of town. I haven't had a lot of creepy encounters in my short life. Knock on wood, please. So this is pretty much the most afraid I've ever been. I was 11 at the time, and I had just passed a CPR babysitting essentials course at the rec. My neighborhood was very close-knit. All the kids on my street played together, and because of my 2 younger brothers, I would soon become the automatic babysitter for the 3 families we lived closest to. I looked after my brothers for short amounts of time. This was my first job as a real babysitter, watching the 2 grade school-aged children who lived across the street. They were family friends. The parents had promised to be home by 11 p.m., and I knew that my parents were home and ready to step in if I needed anything. So I was a little nervous, but I felt like I had things under control. The kids were a babysitter's dream. They had been trained that they were only allowed to choose 1 treat before bed, and I actually refused my offer to let them finish the show we were watching, because it was their bedtime, and they still needed to brush their teeth first. I was floored, but it made my job super easy, so I tucked them in and headed back downstairs to watch TV until their parents returned. The mom is an interior designer, so their house is spacious and absolutely beautiful. Their living room is at the back of the house, with floor-to-ceiling windows and great views of the woods in their backyard. The couch is set up with its back to those windows, and I was watching TV with their elderly white lab, Alex. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something large and light-colored brush past the window behind me. I thought it might just be a deer, but I was 11 and alone. And I have an active imagination, so I began to feel uneasy and pretty on edge. The parents weren't due back for another 2 hours, so I walked into the kitchen to call my mom and dad for reassurance. Alex followed. Their kitchen faces the living room, with the house phone on the counter. This was before cell phones were a thing. Standing at the counter, dialing my parents, I had a clear view through the broad archway into the living room, and out of those enormous windows into the backyard. Alex lay down at my feet as I stood next to the counter and told my mom that I thought I'd seen something out the window. Hearing her voice was as comforting and reassuring as I thought it would be, so I told her that no, I didn't need Dad to come over, and that yes, I'd call her if anything happened. I hung up the phone and sat down on the floor to rub Alex's ears and belly for a few minutes, still kind of wary of the living room. I hadn't been there too long before I got a glimpse of something odd outside those giant windows. I looked harder past the glare of the TV and noticed a tiny light bobbing around in the woods. Probably just a neighbor, I thought. But as I watched, the light seemed to be moving in what was undeniably my direction. My whole body froze, and I stared as the light got closer and closer to the living room windows. And at some point, I realized with complete and paralyzing horror that the light had grown large enough that the source had to be right outside the house. The beam swung from one side of the living room to the other, and then settled directly on my face. I don't even think I squinted in the bright light as it shone through the window into my eyes. I was too startled. Alex snoozed on, placid in his old age and entirely unaware that my heart had pretty much stopped beating. The light moved again, this time swinging away to illuminate a face from underneath. I saw dark, hollow eye sockets and the glowing curves of someone's cheeks, but the face's details were lost in the harsh angle of the flashlight's beam. At this point, I was trying with all my might to scream or to move my fingers enough to dial 911, or to move out of view of the window. Literally anything would have been better than sitting there with my mouth open and tears in my eyes like a stuffed turkey. But I'd never felt this kind of icy terror before, and I was completely immobilized by it. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion, and I was totally powerless. The light swung around to point at me, then quickly moved back underneath the horrible face outside. It repeated this pattern once or twice, and then it suddenly disappeared. The flashlight had been turned off, and for whatever reason, that was enough to finally let me move again. I quickly stood and hit dial, about to call 911 as I mentally debated whether to hole up in this master bedroom with the children or just grab them and try to run out the front door to my parents' house. The rec class had not prepared me for this. Before I even got as far as the foyer in the first one though, I heard a loud boom and felt my gut leap into my throat, as I realized that I remembered closing the main garage doors and locking the door from the garage to the laundry room, but couldn't remember locking the main door from the garage to the backyard. I almost dropped the phone as someone began pounding on the interior door. Through the pounding though, I could hear a voice. A really fucking familiar voice. "Hey, it's Dad. Let me in." I stumbled over completely numb and unlocked the door. My dad could hardly stand up, he was laughing so hard. Apparently my mom had sent him over anyway to check on me, to make sure there was nothing to be afraid of. He'd done a quick sweep of the woods and backyard with a flashlight, under the assumption that Mom had mentioned he'd be coming over. He saw me through the window and attempted to show me it was him by pointing it at me, and then shining the light at his face, under his freaking face. He was aware that the shadows made it impossible to tell who he was, until he saw the color drain from my face and realized he had just given me the scare of my life. He thought it was pretty funny. I didn't really agree. I know that the ending kind of makes this story inappropriate for this, but up until I heard my dad's voice, I really thought I was going to get all kinds of murdered. This experience still shakes me out to this day. I don't know exactly what happened. I live in a very safe neighborhood, which makes this even creepier because it goes to show you never know what lies beneath. My nephew was about 5 years old. I was asked to babysit him for the night. I was young at the time and didn't really know how to watch a kid, so I figured I'd just put on Netflix for a few hours. We went to the kids section of Netflix and started watching some show about talking cars. This was about 5 p.m., so there was still sunlight out. Perpendicular to the couch is a sliding glass door. The curtain for the door was open. I was sitting on the couch with my nephew as we watched TV together. My nephew really liked the show, so we kept watching it. This went on for a few hours until it was dark outside. In my foolishness, I turned on some lights, but I never did shut the curtain. It was one of those things where other people can see in, but all you can see from inside is the blackness of the night. My backyard is adjacent to a big field, so there's no street lights out there or anything. Suddenly, I heard the sound of one of the deck chairs being dragged across the deck. I instantly recognized this sound and just assumed it was my parents. Why they would come home silently and then go outside to move around deck furniture in the middle of the night is something I didn't really think about. Like I said, it's a safe neighborhood. We watched TV for maybe an hour until it was bedtime. When I brought my nephew to bed, I realized my parents had been home, and I asked them who was out on the deck. They both denied ever going out on the deck. Creeped out, I went to the kitchen and turned on the deck light. From the window, I could see that the deck chair had been dragged from its usual spot at the outside table, about 5 to 10 feet away to the sliding glass door. The chair was directly facing the window less than a foot away from the glass, right in front of the opening in the curtains. From where it was, the person would have had a perfect view of me and my nephew. The chair was positioned like someone had just pulled it up and taken a seat, like we were the show. Never noticed anyone outside the window or even felt like I was being watched. It gets creepier. The next day, I found 2 big handprints with the fingers spread out on my bedroom window. My bedroom window was on the first floor. Luckily, the room used to be my brother's and he had some problems with sneaking girls in, so my parents installed some pretty good locks to the points where the window cannot be opened. To this day, I have no idea what happened. It's been several years with no other signs of peeping Toms since. Safe to say, the incident shook me to my core though. I don't leave curtains open at night anymore. I began babysitting at 13 to earn extra money to spend on horribly embarrassing things like Fall Out Boy CDs. I would almost always work for my dad's clients, a lawyer, and get referred by word of mouth. I was babysitting for this one family who had a little girl that was 9 and a little boy that was 7. The parents seemed okay, if a tad crotchety, giving me a full schedule to follow and jokingly threatening to beat any boy who might mysteriously show up after they left. It felt cruel for them to accuse me of even knowing a boy, given I basically looked like an overgrown baby with frizzy hair at that age. Almost immediately after the parents leave, the little girl sings in a creepy high-pitched voice. "We're all alone now. Rightio, cue the Shining soundtrack." "I know," the little boy chimed in. "Let's play fight." Looking back now, I know the kid probably just heard the term on TV, knew the word was shocking, and said it just for a reaction. I totally bought into it at the time, sputtering wide-eyed and changing the subject quickly. These kids were hell for the next hour. I wouldn't let them watch South Park on the TV because their parents didn't seem like the type to allow their precious 7 and 9-year-old to watch a show like that. As soon as I said no, the little girl said casually, "Oh, that's fine. We'll just go play PlayStation in the family room. Feel free to watch it out here." LOL, nope. I knew exactly where that was headed. I said they could watch any other TV show in the living room while I made them dinner. The parents had left instructions to make them sandwiches. I could handle that. Before I even got out the bread, I hear a massive crash. It seems like the little girl has broken glass. Tutting and pissed, but ultimately with no way to punish her, I cleaned it up while these 2 incredibly weird kids watched with wide eyes. Dumping the broken glass in the trash, I went back to making the sandwiches. I'm a vegetarian, so while the kids had chicken, I made a simple salad for myself. Just as I was finishing, the little boy screamed out in what, even from my hyper-vigilant state as an accountable teenage babysitter, sounded like a pantomime of pain. Nonetheless, I ran over to the couch in the living room to check on him. "My ankle," he howled, dramatically flopping back into the couch. While I tried to figure out how he had hurt his ankle, the little girl slipped out of the room. From my side view, I was aware of this, but I didn't really pay any mind. Focused on this little boy pretending to be in pain. He kept saying, "I went to stand, but it hurt too much. I don't know." Over and over until his eyes suddenly flicked to just behind me, where I could see the little girl standing with a perturbing smile on her face. He was miraculously healed. Yeah, praise the Lord. At this point, I was just thinking these kids were really weird, craved attention a little too much, and probably needed more parental involvement. Whatever, I was 13 and that $60 was only 4 hours away. I set out the sandwiches for the two to eat at the dining table, went to get us soda and returned. After pouring soda for both of them, I realized they hadn't even taken a bite out of their sandwiches yet. I asked them what they were waiting for. They smiled. "For you to take a bite out of yours." I'm so glad I had a gut feeling to open the top part of my bread of my sandwich, because when I did, I saw glass. Broken glass. Glass that I'd put in the trash. I stared in horror at the two little kids staring at me, with menacing twin grins. I lost it, shouting, "Are you serious? At the very least, you could have really injured my mouth. What's wrong with you two?" Instead of crying or apologizing or pretending to be ashamed or confused, these two little fuckers began laughing. Not like kids. It was too low. It wasn't that silly, goofy kid laugh. It was low and threatening. I'll never forget that noise. My immediate reaction was, these kids are too young to be laughing like that. I called my older sister, who was 17 at the time, and cried about what happened, and she came over and took over for me. We left the house with chills after the parents arrived. I never babysat for those two again. I can't get past as a level of premeditation that went into sprinkling that broken glass into my sandwich, in a totally remorseless way that responded to me getting upset. They were unlike any other kids I've met before. Two years ago, right around Halloween, I was babysitting for these two ladies who each had a son. They wanted to go out, so I stayed at one of their houses and watched their boys. It was around 8 p.m. and the boys were sitting on the couch, playing on their iPads and whatnot, when somebody knocked on the door. I asked them if anyone was supposed to come over, and they both said no. I go over and check the eye hole in the door, and it's some guy in a gray hoodie, deliberately hunched over so I can't see his face. Immediately I'm thinking, nope, nope, nope. And don't say anything, and start pacing around because I don't want to give him any inclination we're inside. A couple minutes later, I check outside the little window through the curtains, and he's gone. I didn't want to spook the kids anymore, and there weren't any more knocks, so I just kind of let it go as a prank. Cut to a few hours later, and the moms get back. They asked me how everything was, and I say the kids were great, but somebody had come to the door. They asked me what time, and I say around 8, and one of the moms started freaking out and going through their phone. The other one tells me that around that time, somebody had been making strange phone calls to them on a blocked number. They had disguised their voice and were saying things like, "I can see you through the window." They didn't think it was serious because it didn't make any sense in the context of where they were. But in retrospect, we're almost positive it was me he was looking at through the window. They escorted me to my car, and I touched base later, and apparently nothing strange ever happened after that. But I'm just really glad that I didn't open that door because I have a feeling in my gut it would have ended really bad.